Hi everyone, welcome to Feisty on Friday. I'm Tosca Di Matteo, founder of Tosca Coaching and Consulting. And today's topic is silence is not the answer. Yeah, there was a few different things that went on this week that just led me to this like realization that I really had to have this conversation about silence. Hello, Root Marketing. Hi, Heather. Good to have you here. And it was a few things. So I started watching the movie Athlete A. Happy Friday indeed. I know I'm like coming to the end here. And very hard documentary to watch for sure. I read Somebody's Daughter by Ashley C. Ford. And then I had a conversation with Levi James, my personal trainer. Actually, he was on Talk About It Tuesday this week. And we were talking about silence being the killer of like progress for things like white supremacy dismantling and all these systemic issues, right? And and when I was watching Athlete A, I was like, oh my God, like the silence, that occurred, that enabled so much to happen. And then with Somebody's Daughter, that book, right? Like all these, she experienced so much trauma in her life. It was a memoir, and didn't speak of what happened to her for a very long time and suffered in that silence, And it brings me to the kind of work that I do around corporate culture transformation and how silence is also detrimental in those environments. And the consequences are also very damaging and challenging, and maybe we don't look at it the same way that we look at things like sexual abuse, or even verbal abuse in the home, emotional abuse. But the reality is that I think we are in a situation in the world, in our work environments, and everywhere where we've been silenced for so long, or we've been encouraged to be silent for so long about the things that are wrong, in terms of everything from like not questioning authority to accepting what is happening as appropriate or accepting it as okay. And because there's very, very few examples of people standing up to power, or people speaking their truth. And so I feel like we're in this collective moment where silence just is not going to fly anymore, and we need people to join the movement of speaking up about whatever it is, about, whether there's bullyism in the workplace, whether it's Asian hate on the subway, doesn't matter. But what matters is that we take an action and not use silence as a tool, because silence means we're allowing the atrocities to persist. So it's very, corporate power struggles are soul killing. They are. And it's stressful, and we all know, well, I shouldn't say this, but there are crazy stats, right, about how stress drives so much of our physical health. And so when we are in these situations that impact our mental health, like, it's so damaging. And it's funny because I was thinking recently about this word that, people are using, right, this phrase, like psychological safety, right? And I'm like, let's just be real, Okay, what does that mean? It means like you're walking into environments where people aren't fucking assholes. Okay, like I don't know why we got to start using this term psychological safety. I'm just like, we have to create healthier workplace environments. Like we have to create places where people aren't assholes to other people. They don't use power over methodologies other people. We have this fancy word, psychological safety. It's like, no, why don't we just call it human-centric workplaces? Like where we're actually treating people like people. Like that's what it's all about. Like psychological safety sounds like something complicated. It's not complicated. Have integrity, treat people well, and see what happens. See what freaking happens without using fear tactics and, all that stuff. Sorry, I'm like, it's just hard to understand how we got to this place in a lot of ways, right? But yet it's not hard to understand because there is such clear history. That's the other thing I was talking about with Levi, right? Which is like we have to like do the work to understand how we got here in order to stop things from continuing to happen. Do you know what I'm saying? Because I can sit here and I can say like, I am an anti-racist, right? I can say that. And if I don't do the work to understand like how we got to this moment in time and how deeply embedded things are in our culture, I will never understand how to help dismantle it. So we have to understand the history. We have to understand how we got to this place so that we don't fucking repeat the history, right? I mean, you've heard that saying. And so I think, as hard as it is to watch that movie, Athlete A, I'm watching it because I want to know, how did that fucking happen? And how do we make sure that kind of thing doesn't ever happen again? And that's hence this topic of silence came up for me today, which is just like, yeah, like silence is fucking deadly, And I think there's a lot of messages that we get, like don't rock the boat. Like don't get in somebody else's business, like mind your own business, And yes, there are certainly situations in which mind your own business is great advice. But when it comes to somebody else's well-being, don't mind your fucking business. We're all one tribe in this world. Like, get involved and drive awareness that this is not okay and this behavior will not be tolerated, and stand up for your fellow humans. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I know, right. It sounds like we're asking for too much. I think that was in relation to the psychological safety, like vocabulary, and the vocabulary matters. It matters, certainly as a marketer, I know this. And as I look into the history, right, of things like racism in America, and I look at where the language came from and how deliberate it was in dehumanizing people, it's like, know where these fucking words came from and why we shouldn't be using them and what we should be saying instead, or how we have to educate each other about the intention, It's not like, oh, it was by accident these things happen. No, like the evil in the world is by design. It's by design. So we have to understand how to prevent it from happening, and how to undo what's been done. And I'm not, and it's like, I talk about this a lot, right? You can either look at these challenges as hugely complex, right? You can use the word institutional and systemic, and it makes it sound like it's not about humans, it's about documents, and that's not true at all. Well, I shouldn't say it's not true. Yes, and you can also look at it very simply and say it's people making decisions and taking actions that create the environments and create the situations and create the policies and the procedures. And so if we want to throw words around like institution and systemic, and I use these words a lot, I do, we also have to bring it down to the individual level and say, like, we all have a choice each and every day about what we're doing, what we're consuming, and what we're saying, and what we're speaking out loud. Hello, Sarah. So glad you're here. We're talking about, like, speaking up and actually, and I'm like, I started talking about it in terms of atrocities like we see in the movie, like in the documentary Athlete A, right? As well as racism, as well as in corporate environments. And the way that change happens is we speak up. And we're no longer silent about the things that are damaging to us and the things that are no longer serving us. Because for so long, we've just been beaten down that this is the way it is. And you're not allowed to question it. Or if you question it, there's going to be consequences. Well, guess what? Like, most blatant example in the world, right? Rosa Parks. Yes, she made a choice. There were consequences. And guess what? A whole lot of people chose to take sacrifices to make progress. And I think that is also the case when it comes to corporate change. I think that people have to be willing to make sacrifices. They have to be willing to make choices to say, like, I will not stand for this, and I don't want anybody else to stand for this either. Otherwise, we're going to be, 500 years from now in the same situation, feeling trapped by the systems that we are creating and that we're perpetuating and that we're allowing. It's like, I remember, gosh, I can't remember the exact situation, but it was like, oh yeah, I was listening to a panel discussion. Yes, there are choices. That's the other thing. We have to know we have choices. And we have to get out of the mentality of, like, it's either this or that, because I was only given option A or B. Well, there's a million options in between there, but we are made to think that we don't have options when we do, But anyway, back to the story I was saying, which was, I probably lost it. Oh, I think I lost what I was saying. Okay. Anyway, I think that we have a lot more power than we think we have when it comes to making change, and that we have to speak up. All right, I was thinking about the panel discussion. Right? Oh, right. And this woman was saying how, that, hey, if you're working in an environment that they run you into the ground, and it's not sustainable, then leave, right? Well, what percentage of companies would that apply to? A lot, right? And so, yes, you can leave, and absolutely. And either what will happen is enough people are leaving these businesses where they have to make changes, or we have to, like, do the work to say we have to change the places that we are, right? Or we have to create more environments that we don't actually have to leave, because where are we going to leave to if some places haven't been fixed or addressed or creating or have created human-centric places to be. We're just all, and you know what? Maybe that's what it's going to take. Maybe there will be a whole nother Labor Day to celebrate. Maybe what will happen is there'll be a massive walkout in these toxic environments, these toxic cultures and organizations, and we'll see what happens. I mean, it has happened in the past. There are strikes for reasons. But there's a part of me that's like, I wish the change would happen from the top down. That would be ideal. But I think it's got to be the uprising. I think it's got to be the people on the front lines, the people that are sick of taking a shit, to really make some big choices, really make some big changes. And a big part of that, I think, is by speaking up and not being silent and bringing this stuff to the surface. Yeah, it's always the same game and different players, right? Like, And you know, this is how change happens. You know, change happens one person at a time. So that's the other message I want to share, right? Like, you not being silent, like you speaking up will actually make a difference. You have to believe that, and it will, because there are ripple effects in that. And actually, I'm doing a workshop with Elevate, the Elevate Network, on June 22nd at 3 o'clock, and it's about influencing company culture. So if you guys want to join that, it's very easy. If you're not a member, it's only like $10. So come and get some tips on influencing culture. That's about not being silent, right? That is about speaking up. That is about choosing your battles. That is about being smart. And it is about being human-centric, being heart-led. You know, it's not about the iron fist for change. I mean, when you have, you know, you can't always have an iron fist for change. I think that change really does start with empathy. As much as people who are doing damaging things, I think that real change is about seeing the humanity in all of us and starting from that place. I think that's the most effective change, because when people start to feel shame, or when they start to feel like they're wrong, they're just going to get defensive. So we have to find a humane way into change, is my belief. That we have to find some kind of thread of humanity. Miriam, great to see you here. It makes me think of a story. When I was working for a woman who was pretty rough. She was, you know, she was rough. Empathy was not a strength of hers, you know. And she was a change maker. She really wanted change, and she actually wanted to do good stuff, you know, but the how she did it was very harsh, and she didn't make friends doing it. I think, you know, she didn't know how to do things in a way that built relationships. It kind of destroyed relationships. Anyway, she was going into this big meeting, and with somebody, and they kind of were like this, you know. And I said to her, and she was really worried about this meeting, about how it was going to go. And I said, look, think about this guy's situation. He is being forced to lay people off in his team. Like, how do you think he feels about that? And you know what? We went into that meeting, and she led with that. She led with that empathy. And that just set the whole tone for the rest of the meeting. And the guy literally reached out his hand and touched hers, and he was like, thank you. You know, like, he felt seen in that moment, in what was happening, you know. And from that place, she was able to, you know, drive an agenda that even if he didn't agree with, at least it was a humane conversation, because it started with, I know this isn't easy for you, and I have some ideas, you know. So again, I share that to say, how do we make change? We make change by speaking up, about not being silent. And I think that we make change by leading with empathy and finding the humanity, because people are taking actions based on their agendas, their fears, their self-protection, right? It's natural. And that leads some people to make decisions that are harmful to others, you know? But I think that if we can open our hearts, if we open our minds, we'll see, you know what? This person is hurting, you know? And it doesn't make it okay that they're hurting somebody else, but how do you find a way in? Sometimes you find a way in through empathy, and putting yourself in somebody else's shoes. So, you know, it's we kind of go all around the houses with this, right? Because there's serious damage that's being done. And sometimes you need a hard edge, and sometimes you need to call a spade, and sometimes you have to say, what you said was very racist, and you have to call them out, and you have to be bold and firm. And it doesn't mean that can't be heart-centered. It doesn't mean it can't be in integrity, right? So how we address these things matter. Who we're being when we have these conversations matter. Because that will dictate how it's received, you know? And even if somebody can't hear it in the moment, I guarantee you they're going to be thinking about it later. Even if you didn't get the response that you wanted in the moment by speaking up, that's the first step, because you don't know what the ripple effects are going to be. You don't know how it's going to land. You don't know what they're going to be thinking about later. You don't know who was witness to that conversation and how they might make different decisions next time and how they might speak up next time. And that's why we can't choose silence. That's why we can't choose inaction, because we think our actions aren't going to matter. They always matter. Our actions always matter. So yeah, this was a feisty one, I will say. I hope it was helpful for those of you watching now and those watching later. Again, my name is Tosca Di Matteo. You can learn more about me at toscadimatteo.com. And I hope that when you are faced with an option to speak up or stay silent, you will speak up to help drive change and to help create a more human-centric world. Thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Ciao for now.